Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at playerstoo.com, that's playerstoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it helps us out so much. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there giving us 5 stars, if you could leave us a little review as well, it all just helps us out. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. You're an absolute legend to us. All right, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
It's going not bad at all, Mark. Glad to be back here doing the show. Still here in my lockdown cupboard, even though lockdown is slowly easing. I think we both got outside this week, right?
We did indeed. What a lovely venture that was.
Yeah, the sun's kind of disappeared from last week, which isn't so great. But yeah, a bit more outdoor time and a bit of time to see people for a change, which is quite nice. So some modicum of reality and normality returning.
Yeah, definitely. Although where everyone is being very, very sensible, or at least all my immediate friends and family are being very, very sensible, it is nice to start to feel as if things are moving back to normality, isn't it? But Lewis, we're not here to talk about the lockdown. We are here to talk about video games. What have you been playing?
Well, Mark, because I've got more time, I have done the thing that you always criticise me for, which is start a bunch of video games.
Yeah, you did.
Particularly without having finished the one I was already playing. So I am still finishing off XCOM Chimera Squad. I'm absolutely committed to finishing it because I'm very close to the end and I'm still absolutely loving it. Honestly, really, really loving it. But I did this week start my oft-mentioned, at least off-air, playthrough of The Last of Us, the original Last of Us.
Nice
now,
one.
I have previously started that game when it was originally released on the PS3. I bought it and played it, and I think I got about halfway through and then just kind of fell off for whatever reason, and so I decided I need to play through it properly before the new game releases. So I've started doing that. Enjoying it so far, but I'm going to save all my observations on it for next week because I'm only kind of at the point where you first meet Ellie, so still probably only about 2 hours in and
relatively early doors, yeah.
Exactly, and there's not much gameplay up to that point that isn't largely tutorial and a couple of gunfights, so yeah, I'll save all that for next week. But Mark, there is a second new game.
Of course there is, Lewis. Why start one when you could start two?
Exactly. My flatmate and I have started playing Disco Elysium.
Nice. Very nice.
Which is, we've both spoken at length in the past about wanting to play. Again, not too far in, but having played for maybe 3 consecutive nights for decent sessions. We're only like a day and a half into the game. So there's a lot of gameplay ahead of me. But so far, Mark, my observations are that I'm absolutely loving it.
Nice.
I think it's got some of the most mature, some of the smartest, the most realistic writing in a video game I've ever come across, because it doesn't feel like it's all just about moving plot forward or developing character in a very specific way. It's mature, it's hysterically funny at times. It allows you to really play with how your lead character to be, like literally down to the name of the character. Like that is something that gets decided partially on the dice roll, and whether or not it's even true is decided by the dice roll that's going on in the background of the game.
Amazing.
So I should say this is a computer RPG that is all dialogue driven. There's not, so far at least, a lot of action, but it's all centered around a cop who wakes up in a hotel room completely amnesiac, basically passed out drunk, and within the first few minutes of the game you understand that you have a case that you are to solve in this kind of fictional post-war society. You're basically on an island that's been part of a revolution and then bombed to all hell. And essentially the whole start of the game is kind of just figuring out what the hell you're supposed to be investigating, what the hell is going on, who you are, what is happening around you, and there's so many levels to it that I could talk at length about, but suffice to say it is living up to my expectations so far.
Nice one, man. I love that. I'm very happy to hear that, because as you said, we've both talked about in the past wanting to play it, particularly because of how lauded it was when it came to end of the year discussions last year. So yes, definitely been on my list. I was waiting for the console release, and right now I've definitely got enough to be playing in order to wait for that. So I might still wait for it to come to console, but I think that it's something that will probably play quite well with a mouse and keyboard, to be honest.
At the moment, you can't actually play the game with controller support, so I'm having to play it with mouse and keyboard.
Oh, well.
I did try to play it with a controller. So I was actually just going to say, if you are still interested in waiting for the console port, which they are working on, I would be really interested to see what quality of life improvements they make, partly from the Switch to a controller, but also there are issues in the game around the size of text and things like that, and the way it uses the real estate of the screen, I think, is not ideal in a lot of places. So I would be interested to know if that process makes them change certain things that absolutely could be changed on the PC version as well, but the impetus of a console port might make them do that. As you said, you've got so much to play. Definitely it's worth hanging on for if you're more likely to play it on console.
Nice one, Well, I'm very glad that you approve of it, because it's only made me more excited to want to play it as well. But Lewis, I have to get on to what I've been playing this week, and that is the Resident Evil 3 remake, which you played, a couple of months ago now?
Yeah, right at the start of lockdown, I think, some shortly after release, yeah.
I'm not going to harp on about it too much, because I think we covered most of it then, but basically I am enjoying the game. I am enjoying the game, so I don't want everything else to make it seem as if I'm not enjoying the game. But the main and first criticism I would have to give it is that it is very, very short. I've basically got to the last chapter of the game in one extended play session.
Wow.
which does make it feel not brilliant value for money when you think about the fact that this came out as a full price game, you know. I know it comes along with Resistance as well, which is actually like a separate install on the disc, which is the first time I've actually seen that on the PS4.
Yeah.
But I downloaded both, so I'll give that a go as well. But the real reason why 90% of people are going to be buying this is to relive that Resident Evil 3 story. And the reality is that isn't much story to ask someone to pay 50 quid for. Yeah. I mean that is
You've been
the nuts
very
and bolts of it, you know.
and generous about that, I've got to say.
Thanks, man. I was trying, so I'm glad I came across that way. So that is an issue with the game. The game is short, so if you are interested in playing RE3, just know that going in, I suppose. My other disappointment with the game is actually Nemesis, who is the large character who's supposed to follow you around, similarly to how Mr. X did. However, unlike Mr. X in Resident Evil 3, I always felt he put me under pressure. He was genuinely frightening at points. Yep. And it always kind of made me feel quite anxious. Whenever Mr. X was chasing me, I was like, oh my god, Mr. X is chasing me. Whereas when Nemesis is chasing me, I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, Nemesis is chasing me. You know what I mean? It was just like, oh, what an inconvenience. Because in reality, a lot of times when he's chasing you, there feels as though there's very little peril. Like, I feel as if there's more peril in the game just by being put in a room with a bunch of zombies sometimes.
Totally, yeah.
And a lot of your interaction with him actually comes in the form of set pieces or not quite set pieces that are very, very linear and very obvious what you're supposed to be doing, and you're not in any real danger. So outside of boss fights, which you do get into with him, and that's a totally different kettle of fish, but in terms of actually playing through the game, he feels a bit toothless a lot of the times. I don't know if it's because of the environments as well, where a lot of the RE3 remake environments are outside and a lot of the RE2 remake were inside. It just didn't play as well, I never thought. But everything else about the game is great. Everything that was good about RE2 is still here in this. The RE engine is fantastic. I absolutely love it. It is a superb engine. It makes everything look brilliant. The game plays really well. Everything that was good about RE2 is still here. It's just that it's just a much smaller slice of it, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
So that was a little disappointment. I do think it's been a wee bit hard done by, and I had a lot to live up to coming up against RE2. But ultimately, I'm excited to finish it. I just wish it was longer, honestly. That's all I wish. I just wish there was more content there for my money, you know?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people will feel that way going into playing it.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. It's a very slim game in terms of its story campaign, and particularly the fact that Nemesis doesn't kind of fill a lot of the gap that is there. Like, you can afford to have less story if your big set pieces with him are more powerful, but they're just not. I did find him to be the biggest letdown of the game, and I'm sort of glad that you feel the same about it and it wasn't just me.
No, I must admit it was a bit of a letdown for me as well. But Lewis, I think it is now time for the news. Alright, news item number 1. The PlayStation 5 event has been rescheduled for Thursday, June the 11th. Hooray! This is excellent news. However, It is a bit unfortunate for us because we are recording this podcast on a Tuesday and it will come out on the Thursday when the showcase is supposed to happen. So it is a little bit difficult for us to talk about this just now, but we did discuss it at length last week. So if you're interested in our thoughts around that, you can go and listen to last week's episode. However, there was one additional piece of information that came out kind of round about the PlayStation 5 showcase, and it was that Sony are recommending that you listen to it with headphones on because apparently they are doing some cool audio work within the showcase, which sounds pretty cool. I'm very intrigued to see what that is going to be. Of course, this ties back in with what Mark Cerny was saying at the PlayStation GDC presentation, or what would have been the GDC presentation, where Mark Cerny was putting a lot of emphasis on audio design and doing a lot of very, very clever things with audio. So I'm really interested to see what that turns out to be in practice, you know?
Yeah, and how that comes across when you're not actually playing the PlayStation itself, right? It's just coming to us through YouTube or whatever. That'll be interesting to see how well it plays, but it's cool that they are so confident in it that that's what they're telling us to do for what is effectively the first big reveal of anything PlayStation 5 in terms of software, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that their confidence is a good sign, and hopefully they've managed expectations correctly here and we're not expecting our minds to be blown by some awesome sound thing, and in actual fact the sound just sounds quite good, you know? Rather than something more than that. Because if you're saying that, if you're putting that out there now, I'm expecting something more.
Yeah,
so
you've set expectations by saying it.
You better come calling, yeah. Alright, well, one other piece of news that kind of came out round about the PlayStation and the PlayStation 5 was a substantiated rumour that a remastered version of Bloodborne will be coming to the PlayStation 5 and PC. This all kind of started quite strangely with a streamer called Casey Explosion, who tweeted out saying that she would donate £100 to a racial justice charity of the person's choosing for information about Bloodborne coming to PC. She seemed to think that there was some sort of Steam listing for it or something like that, but I didn't really find that anywhere else other than her tweet. However, she seemed to get this information quite quickly, and she seems to have now found sources that confirm that Bloodborne is not only coming to PC, but is coming to PlayStation 5 as well, and both will be a remaster of the original. And that this was going to be one of the games shown off at PlayStation Showcase, which I guess if you're listening to this when the podcast comes out on Thursday, you might very well know whether or not that's right. After that, a small-time YouTuber called PC Gaming Inquisition claimed that he had sources as well that was saying the same thing, and that Bloodborne was going to be a joint effort between Bluepoint, who made the Shadow of the Colossus remake, which is an absolutely fantastic remake, and Q-Lock, who made the original Dark Souls remaster, which was very well received as well. And that YouTube channel also mentioned the other PlayStation 5 exclusives that might be heading towards PC as well, which is also very interesting. However, none of this to me was speaking very true until Nibble, who is what is a quotes industry analyst on Twitter, lent the rumour some support by tweeting about it himself, and we have quoted him numerous times on this podcast, and he is fairly reliable. So that lent it quite a lot of credibility to me. And he also said that the alleged Demon Souls remake, which Bluepoint were apparently working on, is also still happening. So apparently here we're looking at a Bloodborne remaster and a Demon Souls remake coming to the PS5. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting news for Souls fans and Bloodborne fans in particular, I suppose. I guess I think bringing it to PS5 at launch, particularly in a kind of remastered version, is great. I'm sort of a little disappointed if that ends up being what Bluepoint have been working on. Like, I get that maybe they're actually doing Demon Souls and just maybe contributing assets or something to...
That's what it sounds like. It sounds like Bluepoint, according to Nibble, have been working on the Dark Souls remaster and have been sort of supporting Q-Lock on the Bloodborne remaster. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, that's a bit more palatable. Yeah, I just had this fear that the Bluepoint game that we've all been kind of hoping for so long was going to be an up-resed game from this generation, which isn't super exciting, but to have those two things come together, both a Demon Souls remake, full remake as you called it, versus a Bloodborne remaster at the same time, like that is going to get so many of these Soulsborne fans into the PS5 quite quickly, I would have thought.
What do you think about it coming to PC? Because arguably that is the bigger news here. I mean, I'm sure that people would have expected Bloodborne to appear on the PS5 in some description, whether it be a remaster or just the original game, you know? But the fact that it's coming to PC is just another game now that was a PlayStation exclusive coming to PC, which seems to be something that PlayStation are now far more open to. Would you like to see more exclusives go there, or do you think that would be detrimental to PlayStation in any capacity?
I can't see any argument that it is massively detrimental. I mean, we've talked about this before. Basically, I think it's a good thing as long as there's still some exclusivity window for PlayStation, and particularly when it comes to proper first-party games. You know, we're talking about Horizon Zero Dawn maybe coming to PC.
No, Horizon Zero Dawn is coming to PC.
Yeah.
That is the first PlayStation-developed game that's coming to PC.
That is, yeah.
So Bloodborne, although it was published by PlayStation, was of course developed by From Software, who are an independent studio and not owned by PlayStation.
Exactly, and so as with Death Stranding, which is kind of a similar situation.
Exactly.
The window on Death Stranding was quite short, whereas the window on Horizon Zero Dawn is quite long, and I think that makes total sense going forward. I think generally speaking, that strategy is probably good for PlayStation to make sure PC players still feel part of the PlayStation ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that window is quite important as well. Do you know what I mean? If they were coming to PC day on date, I think that would be quite detrimental to PlayStation themselves, because I think a lot of people would be thinking, oh well, why am I buying a PlayStation 5 or a PlayStation 4 or whatever when I could just buy a PC and then I can play everything, you know? Yeah. But I think that exclusivity window is pretty important to PlayStation, and ultimately will probably what they will be leveraging to sell their PlayStation 5 come the winter months. Alright, news item number 2. The UK Department of Digital Media, Culture and Sports, the DCMS, is set to call for evidence over concern loot boxes are, quotes, training children to gamble. Now, I'm going to start at the beginning here and say that I have problems with the terminology that they're using in that headline, but marching on. So this comes after the DCMS Select Committee recommended that the government regulate loot boxes under the Gambling Act in September 2019. The Guardian now says that 71% of the most popular titles on Steam use some form of loot boxes. In other European countries, and well, in Belgium specifically, they have already classified loot boxes as gambling back in January 2019. Now, the reason that I've brought that up is because obviously with Belgium declaring that loot boxes were gambling, that wasn't enough to effect wholesale change within the video games industry. However, I'm feeling pretty good about the fact that if the UK classify loot boxes as gambling, that we might start to see developers really think about their implementation of loot boxes and how they are actually affecting the gamers.
I would agree with that, yeah, because of the size of the market here, and there's quite a strong video game culture here. Not to say that there isn't in Belgium or anywhere else, but this kind of debate happening here can have, I think, a bit of a wider ramification potentially.
It's just a bigger market, mate.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
That's ultimately what it comes down to. I don't know how the population of Belgium, I imagine it's somewhere around 10 million people, and there's 65 million people here or something like that. It's simply a bigger market, and I think that has a lot to do with it, and hopefully people like EA specifically are getting dragged across the coals with this, because they always do, but ultimately are still one of the biggest offenders of this with their FIFA Ultimate teams. And I know there's a similar system in Madden, which is all to do with these card packs effectively that you get there. Just loot boxes. It's just loot boxes. It's just gambling on whether or not you're going to get a Cristiano Ronaldo. That's all it is. That's all anyone's hoping for when they buy those packs, is that they get the big windfall. And I think that it's long overdue that we realise that really children shouldn't be exposed to this much gambling. And I'm going to call it gambling because I fully believe that it is gambling.
Yeah.
And what I will say as well is that in the Guardian article they put it nicely, is that it's just encouraging people to take a chance and take a chance and take a chance and take a chance and take a chance. And I think that is quite psychologically quite a bad place to get to, particularly very young kids. You know what I mean? And that's what we're talking about here. I mean, people 3 and up are allowed to play FIFA legally according to the PEGI ratings,
Yeah.
So to think that someone who's 9 can go and buy 300 quid's worth of Ultimate Team packs is just ridiculous. It's just absolutely ridiculous that is still a thing.
It's a big problem, and it's like you say, it's a particularly one for big games like FIFA and Madden that touch a lot of different customer bases. So you do have young kids playing them, and you do have lifelong gamers playing them, and you have people who don't really understand the ins and outs of all of this stuff. So there's quite a lot of base to cover, and I think that they're kind of squeaking by on a lot of that. It's important, I think, to say the reason this has come about now is that committee, the DCMS, as you said, sort of challenge the government to justify why it's not gambling if they want to keep it exempt from the Gambling Act. And so there's quite a provocative element of that, which is kind of now you have to say why it's not that rather than prove that it is gambling, you know? So I think we might see a bit of development on this issue, assuming that, our government has enough headspace right now to properly get the evidence that they're looking for. So you've got to hope that this committee can push this forward and make some change happen, because it's an issue that's been rumbling on for so bloody long.
Yeah, and the Guardian article, which we're referring to here, of course, will be in the show notes over at PlayersToo.com. But also in that, they reference the fact that this could be part of a wider overhaul of gambling regulations in the UK as well. Gambling culture in the UK is quite a big deal, and I think it's quite frankly is long overdue. Something for a more digital age. I think the last proper regulation was from back in 2005 or something like that.
Yeah.
And the world has moved on, not least of which with things like this,
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a final point is that although the conversation about loot boxes has died down and a lot of big publishers have got a lot better about what they are doing with their loot boxes, the reason for that is because of pressure like this. The reason that they're better now is because of pressure like this. So this is still a good thing that this is happening. I mean, don't think that this is gone away, or don't think that they've just done this out of the goodness of their heart. They've done this because of political pressure, and this is exactly the type of political pressure that they should be under to change. Alright then, news item number 3. Head of Xbox, Phil Spencer, has given 2 interviews this week regarding the launch of the Xbox Series X and the future of Xbox. The 2 articles I am referring to, of course, both will be in the show notes over at PlayersToo.com. The first is a BBC article called Xbox Series X, Microsoft tailors launch plans for the pandemic. So this is very much focusing around trying to launch a new console during the pandemic. And then there was a Wired interview as well called The Future of Xbox Isn't Just a Console. So just starting off with the BBC article, as I said, this largely focuses on like the pandemic and what they're doing around their launch to try and deal with that, or what they had to do during lockdown to continue to produce the console. Spencer has reiterated as well that the supply chain for the new consoles will be, quotes, uninterrupted, and he feels good about the autumn release. But Spencer also said that if this is not the year when families want to make a decision to buy a new Xbox, that's okay. Which I mean is a good statement for someone at the head of a company who's effectively trying to sell you a new box to say. And he also mentions things like backwards compatibility and smart delivery and Xbox All Access and the Games Pass and all the Xbox services, as well as support for staying on the current platform. My question to you, Lewis, is do you think that Xbox are making it a bit too easy to just stay put and not buy the new big console? Because to me, it feels as if they've went from being very customer focused to being near lackadaisical in their marketing about this.
What do you mean by that?
I mean by that is that if this is the message that Xbox are pushing, then I think a lot of Xbox gamers are rightfully going to hear that and will think, well, actually, Xbox are going to be supporting the Xbox One with Halo Infinite and all their first-party games for at least 2 years, and Phil Spencer has said that. And I'm still getting my Games Pass. I don't need to spend what will probably amount to approaching 500 quid on a new console on the run-up to Christmas in a year that I might be furloughed, in a year that I might have been laid off, God forbid.
Yeah.
They're making it very easy for an Xbox gamer to go, at launch, no, I'll just wait. And I think that when we get to that point, what will happen in the media and how this will read to all the other gamers, because this isn't PlayStation's message. PlayStation very much want you to buy the new box.
Totally, yeah.
Is that it will appear, perhaps, that because of Xbox messaging, that they will not have sold as many consoles, basically. Because a lot of their gamers may have been, I don't want to say encouraged to stick where they are, but it certainly doesn't appear as if they're being overly encouraged to move on. Yeah. Does this make sense?
It does make sense, yeah. And yeah, I think I've got to agree with you. I guess I hadn't thought about it in quite the same terms. But yeah, as you said, PlayStation have been very upfront about the fact that they want you to transition, whereas Xbox really aren't. And in some senses, that's great, right? It is still quite a consumer-focused thing, and that's been their agenda over the last few years. But what they're focusing on is get you into Game Pass, get you into the subscription service, make sure you're playing games on their platforms. But yeah, I still can't see, and I've been saying this for a long time, and obviously being accused of being a Sony pony, but I'm still struggling to see what it is that does make someone want to jump across. You'll have your early adopters and your big time Xbox fans who want the console at launch, the people who, particularly for big Halo fans, they won't countenance the thought of playing that on a weaker system, the system that they already own. But for a lot of other people, yeah, I mean, I would be looking at it if I was there thinking, I can get Halo, I've still got Game Pass, I've got all these games that I'm still working my way through, and most third-party games for a long time will probably be across both generations. So what is the incentive to jump? I don't see it totally. And it does feel a little bit to me, I don't want to suggest that Xbox are kind of preparing the ground for failure, because if you start to reframe what success looks like so that the normal metric of success no longer applies and you've worked your way around it, that could look a little bit like they feel like they are not going to sell as many boxes as PlayStation, and they want that conversation to be different this time.
Perhaps, maybe this is all foreshadowing that. In the BBC article itself, and you mentioned it to me and brought it up just now, the Xbox aren't necessarily framing success of the launch around the amount of consoles that are sold in the first year. And Phil Spencer has been quite honest about that. But at the same time, if you're very, very actively change that conversation, I think it's natural that you ask questions of why. Is the reason that you want to change this question because you do want to be more consumer focused and whatever? And I have no reason to doubt that Phil Spencer does. And I've said to you before, I mean, me being the Sony pony that I am, I've said to you on numerous occasions, I think that Phil Spencer's great, and I would love for him to have been the media presence for PlayStation. Do you know what I mean? I think Xbox have hit the nail on the head with his hire, because I think that he's fantastic. But as soon as you try and reframe the conversation like that, and suddenly they're saying that, oh well, the bottom line unit sales aren't how we measure success. But, I mean, I bet your boardroom does.
Well, yeah.
I bet your shareholders do. And although you can say, oh, this is great and we have such a great community here, and a higher percentage of players on Xbox play more games than on other platforms and have more friends, and the network's a lot tighter and stuff like that, and all that's great and all that's like super, super good and really, really good stuff. But if that network is 25% of the size of PlayStation's network, then that still isn't a very good look for you, you know?
Well, exactly.
By now, I just expected this push from Xbox. They just still hasn't really come, you know?
Yeah.
We've known about the Series X for quite a long time now, and there's never been this thing of like, yeah, let's go. We're all about Xbox Series X now. And it's just never come. It's just never come. And I don't think that it is coming, and I think that they're going to stick to this message the whole way through.
Well, yeah, and they've also ceded the ground to Sony in terms of getting out first with big game announcements and getting people excited for the transition that way. I guess his quite, again, consumer-focused message of, if this isn't a good year for you, it's not the worst thing. But if they weren't up against PlayStation, if there was no PS5 coming this autumn, would they delay the launch of this console to a better time for the consumer where the jump might not be as frightening? Or are they genuinely saying that the consoles bleed into one another to such an extent that they, no matter what else was going on in the world, they would be happy to launch it and say that? And I just don't know about that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I would agree. And don't get me wrong, that's not, again, an indictment of Xbox, because if it were the other way around, PlayStation would do exactly the same thing. I don't doubt that for a second. Just moving on to the other article quite quickly. This article was much more focused on Xbox's messaging that they want gamers to play across any devices that they have. This was, although it wasn't really very explicitly stated, it was much more to do with like their xCloud and bringing people together, and it was brought up that they were championing cross-play and just want everyone to play games on the platform that they have, and they want them to play Xbox games. However, that to me, again, isn't really telling me a good reason why I should go and buy a Series X. And when asked why isn't the Xbox just a PC in the living room, the best response that he had to that, although acknowledging that to some people it is just a PC in the living room, is basically that you need UI and input mechanisms that work on a TV, which is not difficult. That's not the crux of what a console is. That's not why it's not a PC in your living room. So that to me was an uncharacteristically poor answer from Phil Spencer, because to me what you've done is tell me it is a PC in your living room that only runs Xbox games.
Yeah, that's got a different OS on it, basically.
If it is just going to be a PC in my living room, then why wouldn't I just make it a PC in my living room? Do you know what I mean? Like an actual PC. So my question now here is, Do you think that Xbox are making it too easy for people not to buy an Xbox at all? And just stick with their Xbox One, then think to themselves, oh well, if I'm going to be spending $500 on an Xbox, do you know what? For a couple of £100 more, and if I'm not going to be buying the console at launch, I could save up and I could get myself an absolutely banging gaming PC. Job's a good one. My point in this is, nowhere do I feel as if Xbox are encouraging me to buy their new console. It's getting to the point now where I don't understand what the message is. It's all become quite wishy-washy. I thought that we were going to get more from Xbox Series X by this time, and they were going to start really, really pushing it by this point, particularly because PS5 is going to be coming this week, and we know that it's going to be coming this week, and they will be pushing it. I know for a fact that they're going to be pushing it. So I just don't get it. It's kind of what it comes down to. I just don't get it.
Yep, it's a strangely fluid message, definitely, and one that's that has its problems around how focused they've been on cross-gen compatibility and all that stuff, all these good moves. I am someone who bought a laptop for not much more than the Xbox is likely to cost. I have a subscription to Xbox Game Pass on my laptop. I can play most of the games. I mean, the console library for Game Pass is obviously bigger, but a lot of the games that you can play on this laptop, fine. You know, I'm not particularly bothered about graphics and stuff, so, you know, there's compromises there. But I think you're right. Like, people will be asking themselves that question of just, if I'm absolutely dying to play this at the highest level, am I better making a longer term investment by getting a PC that can be modded and upgraded and, you know, and like you said, can play everything, can even play PlayStation games, as we're starting to see.
Yeah, well, exactly. All right, news item number 4. Sega have announced that they are releasing a Game Gear Micro, which is a mini version, or a micro version, of their classic handheld. And when they say micro, they are not exaggerating. Good God. It is 80mm wide, 34mm tall, and the screen itself is very slightly more than an inch diagonally. It will easily fit in the palm of your hand. The screen size itself is a third of the size of the original Game Boys, which tells you how small it is. It is crazy how small it is. If you've not seen images of it, Google it. We'll put links in the show notes over at PlayersToo.com to a Verge article which shows you all the consoles, but they are absolutely minuscule. They come in 4 different colour variations, and each one has 4 different games on it. They're all very Japanese focused just now, because there is only a release specified in Japan at the minute. Currently that's October the 6th. But they will each cost £50. And when you look at this thing, this tiny, tiny little thing that would fit in the palm of your hands, with a screen that is very slightly over an inch wide, you're just looking at it going, how can this possibly be £50 worth of stuff here? However, if you buy all 4 of them, so for £200, Sega will throw in a, quotes, big window magnifying glass screen, which is, you used to get them for Game Boys as well. It was like a magnifying glass you put over the screen effectively, so you have half a chance of fucking seeing the thing. Honestly, I love the novelty of these things. I do. I like them as an object. I like the NES Mini, the SNES Mini, and the PlayStation Mini. I love them all as objects, but I just never think that any of them present very good value for money at all.
No, and certainly this one doesn't, for my money, so to speak, because 4 games on each one, you have to buy all 4 for £50 each to get all of the games. It's tiny. Like, if you told me this was an April Fool's joke, I would believe you. I cannot understand why they think that a substantial enough number of people are going to want to buy a 1-inch screened version of some old games. Like, I
don't know if this is just super Japanese focused, man. Handheld gaming in Japan is just huge. It's huge. But honestly, this thing looks like a keyring. It looks like a keyring for the Game Gear. It looks like something you would have bought at a Sega shop for a joke, or as like a tacky present to give someone. You know what I mean? It looks like nothing, and they're asking £50 for it. It is bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. I will be very, very keen to see the reviews of this when it comes out and to see how good the emulation is. But I'm not holding up a lot of hope. I very much encourage everyone to Google the Game Gear Micro just to see the size of it. It is truly shockingly small, and quite frankly, as someone who suffers a little bit from RSI issues, looks like an ergonomic fucking disaster as well. Alright, finishing off as we always do with a couple of shout outs. Shout out number 1, Valorant, Lewis, has officially come out this week. Although the game has been in closed beta since April, it's currently sitting at an 84 on Metacritic. Perfectly good score, but honestly, who cares? Because it has landed massively with the PC gaming crowd, with the streaming crowd. It was the third highest streamed game on Twitch. I checked it just before we started recording this. It is fully hit with the crowd that it was supposed to hit with. I was also reading today as well that Riot are apparently prototyping a console release, or at least that might be in the works at some point, which I would be very, very keen to try.
So yeah, you would play this on console, is that what you're saying? If it does get ported eventually, you're interested enough?
I mean, I'd be interested enough to give it a go, mate. I would give it a go. It was like when Apex Legends came out. I looked at that and I thought, oh, that looks quite interesting, I'll give it a go. And I did, and I played it for like a good couple of months, then I was kind of done with it. I imagine that if I connect with it in that way, it will be much the same thing. I'm not someone who's going to be playing the same game season after season after season after season, you know? But if it's there and it's on PlayStation and it's free, then yeah, why the hell not? Why the hell not, Lewis?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it sounds interesting as well, to be honest. Not my type of game, but glad that they got the success with the launch that they were looking for.
Alright, shout out number 2. Command & Conquer, the remastered collection, came out this week as well. This was a remaster of the original Command & Conquer and Red Alert, currently sitting at a very respectable 83 on Metacritic. And the reviews are very positive, I've got to say. And the main drawback seems to be that it is simply an old game and that it does not have the luxuries of modern game design, but by all accounts, a very, very good remaster. And I'm thinking back to those Mafia remasters that really didn't land so well and people were quite disappointed with. It's just great to see a game that I remember playing, I think honestly, quite genuinely, a pirate copy of that my uncle gave me when I was about, 10.
Was that Red Alert you were playing, yeah?
Yeah, it was Red Alert. I did play the first one as well at some point. I also had Generals, which I think came later on. I must admit, I've long since moved on from Command & Conquer, and I have actually very little interest in going back to it, to be completely honest with you. But if you are a Command & Conquer fan, it looks as if these are cracking remakes. And yeah, they might just be for you, as long as you can put up with old school game design.
Nice one.
Shout out number 3. Only a few hours ago, Bungie have announced the new season and expansion to Destiny 2. The new season is called Season of Arrivals, which launches today, and the next expansion is called Beyond Light, which releases on September the 22nd. Bungie also revealed that Destiny 2 is coming to next gen, although I don't really think that was ever really in doubt. But also that Destiny 2 is getting expansions in 2021 and in 2022 called The Witch Queen and Lightfall, respectively. So that basically putting to bed any suggestion that we're getting a Destiny 3 anytime soon, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And there was a statement made on Bungie's website as well, actually talking about how they were beginning to remove some of the older content. I think it was the sort of year one content, and maybe beginning to cycle that out because the game has got too big to effectively update and maintain. That is their words. Which, I mean, I suppose a game as a service has got to sort of come to that at some point, you would have thought. It's just I'd never really heard of it before, certainly not stated as plainly as Bungie did. I just thought that was quite wild. Yeah, so what do you think of them putting out a roadmap all the way to 2022? This is what we've been asking for, right? Transparency, and why don't they just tell us when all the games are coming?
Well, totally, yeah. I think it's great that they're doing that. It reassures current players that the time and potentially money that they're investing in it is worthwhile, that they're going to continue to have the fun with it that they've been having. And yeah, it just shows that Bungie are confident that they can continue to iterate on the game rather than have to rebuild it all again for next generation, that they can just continually develop it. So yeah, I think it's all good stuff. And the fact that it's also going to be cross-generational, and I think they're looking at cross-play as well, across platforms, so it's all good stuff. And am I right in saying this is the first thing that they've kind of done since leaving Activision, the first big step? Or
I believe so. Someone can correct us if we're wrong here, but I think Forsaken, which was the last like big expansion, I think that was the last thing that they'd done in conjunction with Activision. And I think everything since then basically has been just Bungie, and this will be the first thing that they've done like properly by themselves, if you want to put it that way. But Bungie have always been good for content. I mean, even way back to their Halo days, they've always been a very, very competent studio, and I have no doubt that the new expansion will be good for fans, hopefully. I mean, I know sometimes it's been a wee bit hit and miss with Destiny, but I think more or less recently they've been on point.
They always seem to turn it around, yeah.
Alright, shout out number 4, and this is a bit of a PSA. If you remember back in April, we mentioned that Nintendo had a data breach which could have compromised people's accounts on Switch, and it has now been revealed through a Eurogamer article, I believe, that data breach has affected nearly twice as many people as Nintendo originally thought it did. So I just want to reiterate, as we did back then, that anyone who has a Switch should change their password immediately. Just do it right now and enable two-factor authentication. And if you can't do that right now, set a reminder on your phone or something to do it. Cybersecurity is really, really important, and you should really be taking active steps to protect yourself when things like this happen. So everyone just make sure that they do that. And two-factor authentication is a really, really powerful tool. Alright, a shout out number 5. itch.io are giving away a bundle for racial justice and equality, which includes over 1,000 of their projects, most of which are games, a lot of which are tabletop games, but it's only a $5, or in fact less than a $5, it's $5, in aid of the NAACP Legal Defence and Education Fund and the Community Bail Fund, when all donations are split 50-50 between those two charities. This is, of course, in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protests, which are continuing around the world, but particularly in North America just now. For those of you that don't know, itch.io is a sort of gaming platform / storefront for indie developers, but you can go and buy games there, but you can also go and buy like gaming assets and things like that there, and sort of workbooks and tutorials and things like that people have done. And it works on a system where the developer can set like a minimum price for their game, but you can choose to pay more. So it's or as you put it, Lewis, you can sort of tip them, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
And they also do a lot of kind of game jams and things like that. So they're very, very developer focused, but it's very much in the indie developer side of things. So some of the games in this now are amazing. They've actually added more games not very long ago at all. In fact, it was when I was putting these show notes together that I had to update everything because it was being updated as I was typing. But now Celeste is part of this package, Night in the Woods is part of this package, Overland is part of this package, A Short Hike is part of this package, A Minute is part of this package, Oxenfree is part of this package, and Quadrilateral Cowboy are part of this package. And that is just a few that I picked out that I just recognised as good games. You know what I mean? There are over 1,000 things here, but what it really is just a really good way to donate to charity. It's a ridiculously good deal for you, and you're donating $5 to a damn good cause. Yeah. And also, I found one that is called Social Interaction Training, which I thought would be perfect for you, Liz.
I think I made that same joke when I saw it the other day, actually.
Yes.
There's a lot of like what looks like really interesting smaller projects on there as well. There's so much to explore. When I bought it, it was like breaching $2 million they'd already made. So amazing. Well, Lewis, you'll be happy to know that they're now over 3. Oh wow!
So there
Jesus
you go.
Christ, there you go. Yeah.
$3 million in their goal. Their stretch goal's now up to $5 million, and you know what? I think they'll hit it.
I think so. Yeah.
Celeste is one of the best games I've ever played. Never mind an indie game. So the fact that you can get that for $5 plus 999 other projects, it's an absolutely sensational deal. And I've paid more than £5 for Celeste, Night in the Woods, A Short Hike, Minute, and Oxenfree. So this is a fantastic deal, an absolutely fantastic deal. All right, Lewis, and with that, I think it is time for a beer, and then we will be back with Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is the last year in video games. And the reason that we are doing this is because we are about to turn 1 on Friday, on the 12th, was the first time that we launched our podcast, which was our first 2 E3 covering episodes, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Back in 2019. And just before we get into this, I guess I would just like to thank everyone for coming with us on this journey, still continuing to listen to us, because honestly, I wasn't convinced we were going to get this far. So there we go. I'm very, very grateful to anyone that has listened to us over the last year, and it's amazing that we're turning 1. So we thought, let's have a look back at what PlayersToo has covered over the past year. So Lewis, what has happened?
What the bloody hell's been going on? Just to reiterate that, thanks to everyone who's been tuning in, particularly if you've been with us right from the very beginning. That is so good. It's quite a journey for us, and really good that you've come along on it. But yeah, so diving into, I just wanted to bring up some of the games we've been talking about, some of the big stories that we've covered. That's obviously a big part of what this podcast is talking about the issues and the stories around gaming, as well as the games themselves. So maybe starting off with a couple of quick fire openers, although this might be the hardest question of all. What do you think, Mark, is your favourite game that you have played that was released in the last 12 months? Maybe to close that window slightly. Your favourite game that was released in the last 12 months?
Oh, wow. See, it's difficult, this, because last year was a relatively, I don't want to say weak year, but there was no standout, amazing, fantastic game from last year. So I'm very, very tempted to say Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Oh, really? Wow.
Which I've only just finished, yeah. I think that might be my favourite game that I've played since we have started being a podcast, Lewis. So there you go.
Wow. I mean, because if you broaden that out to every game that you've played, which obviously includes a lot of older things as well, like that is some statement.
That would probably be The Last of Us, which I only played in January myself, you'll remember. That would probably be The Last of Us. But in terms of a new title released in the last 12 months, I would say Final Fantasy VII Remake. What about you? That's interesting. What about you?
To be honest, I've been kind of struggling with that question as well. As you said, it's been a bit of a year of peaks and troughs in terms of releases, and there's a lot of kind of smaller things that maybe stand out more than some of the bigger games. So in some senses, the game that's like stuck with me the most would have been Death Stranding towards the end of last year. I don't know if I want to say that's definitely the best game that I played in that period, though. In some ways, I think what I actually want to say the answer is, and it feels a little bit cheating and you might pick me up on it, was Kentucky Route Zero, which obviously only the 5th episode of that came out in this period, but we played it through. I guess I'm thinking about this question in terms of like impact on me and changing what I expect from games or what I want to see in games, and that really did have quite a big effect. So I would lean that way, but there's a lot of good games, I would say. There's obviously games like The Outer Worlds, which I know was a big favourite of yours from the tail end of last year. Untitled Goose Game, which killed the DICE Awards and and something also like Jedi Fallen Order, which we both played and had problems with, but really enjoyed. So
for me, Control as well. For me, Control, definitely.
Exactly, yeah. It is tough to pick like one game out of that, and particularly when you do start factoring in all the games that we've included in that time that we've been making the podcast. I wanted to pick you up on, so I mentioned Kentucky Route Zero there. What is your favourite of the play-along games that we've been doing since we started this podcast?
Oh man, that's a good question.
I can quickly run through the list for you if you want. I've got it here.
That'll be very handy. From
the earliest to the most recent, so far we've done Into the Breach, Undertale, Braid, Gorogoa, Limbo, Inside, Ape Out, Kentucky Route Zero, Her Story, Telling Lies, and Thomas Was Alone.
I knew it as soon as you said it, and it was Braid.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, it's Braid, undoubtedly for me personally. Limbo and Inside are probably a close second and third there. And Into the Breach was just fantastic as well. Kentucky Route Zero in its own way as well was very, very special. But I think in terms of the game that I enjoyed the most and that I would be most likely to go back and play is probably Braid. Yeah,
I think you would play that some more again. Yeah,
I would happily go back and play Braid. Yeah, I would happily go back and play Limbo and Inside as well. I'm not sure how much I'd be rushing back to go and play Kentucky Route Zero. I know that you've already went back and played Kentucky Route Zero, but as good as that was and as amazing a gaming experience as that was, I'm not sure that it's something I would be rushing back to for a second playthrough immediately, you know?
That's totally fair. That makes sense, yeah. I mean, it's a type of game that rewards you in a certain sense and not in maybe the more traditional senses, so I think that's fair enough. I mean, I just wanted to bring that list up because we've covered so many great games within that time frame as well. Into the Breach, I think, given that it was the earliest one we did, I mean, I kind of think now and again about going back and playing that because it was so much fun. And one other question around the games that we've kind of been talking about a lot over the last year is just any that you found to be surprising successes or games that you maybe weren't expecting too much from that you really enjoyed, and maybe more interestingly, what were the big letdowns from the last 12 months? The
big letdowns in terms of things that I've played?
Not necessarily, it can be broader than that. I've got one or two to throw at you.
Hit me with some.
Well, one that really stuck out to me when I was looking back across this list was Wolfenstein Youngblood, which we covered really early. It was shown at E3 2019 and released in July 2019, so it was one of the kind of earliest games that I think we were both really excited for when we started doing the show, and then when it came out it just totally bombed, and I think neither of us played it. I didn't play any of it at all.
I watched it being played once, which was interesting, and it was two friends of mine that were playing it, and neither of them were having very much fun with it. It looked like, so that probably was a bit of a disappointment, to be completely honest with you. Another one that was a bit disappointing, although not necessarily a bad game, I would have to say, is Death Stranding to a certain extent. I think through the lenses of hindsight now, that game did a lot of really wild stuff, but what it wasn't was actually very good to play. And by that I don't mean it wasn't fun to play, because we've discussed before on this podcast about games that weren't fun, like for example Red Dead Redemption 2 I don't think was necessarily quotes fun, but it was enjoyable to play, whereas a lot of the time I felt Death Stranding actually wasn't enjoyable to play or wasn't enjoyable to watch as it was quite a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely in that front. Way too many long cutscenes for sure. I mean, I found the actual gameplay experience of it still really interesting and rewarding. But yeah, as we said at length at the time, it's one of the most divisive games that I can remember in terms of people's reactions to it. So in terms of big surprises for me, I want to throw one out there that we played together actually quite a lot of, which was Borderlands 3.
Borderlands 3 was great.
Not a game that I expected to get anything out of. I was fairly reluctant even to play it when we first started talking about it, and I just had so much fun when we were playing that back in the heady days of when we could actually be in the same room together. And I just wanted to throw that in there, because by doing this podcast even and us trying out different games, that's the kind of thing that has made me pick up a game like Borderlands 3 and just really kind of enjoyed playing it.
One for me, in terms of being surprised, was probably Link's Awakening, actually. I was pretty surprised at how much I enjoyed that. I was expecting a fairly, I was going to say low-key experience, but I suppose it was a low-key experience, but I don't know, I just wasn't expecting very much from it. And in actual fact, it really, really delivered, and I really, really enjoyed that game, really enjoyed it a lot, and the art style in particular was superb. So yeah, I suppose that's probably a bit of a surprise for me, but I don't know, I think that I just have very measured expectations of what to expect quite a lot of the time, so therefore I'm rarely very disappointed, because I often know of what's going to disappoint me ahead of time, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so I generally avoid those games.
And so just jumping on then to some of the other kind of stories and issues within gaming that we've covered in the last year. I mean, there's so much obviously to touch on, and a lot of things that interrelate with one another. I guess the starting point, because it was a thing that we were talking about long before we even started doing this show, is around loot boxes and gambling within games. Great that we've got this news today that the UK is looking at it. Do you think in the 12 months that we've been doing this, things have changed in that way?
Yeah, I do. I think that there's been a definite move in the video games industry away from loot boxes and more into season passes, which I think is good. I think that's good, and I think everyone is far more on board with that model, both publishers and gamers alike. I do think that loot boxes are still an issue, despite the fact that we don't really speak about them very much anymore. But I think that things like what we were talking about today and the sort of political pressure that's been put on big game publishers to do something about this and change this is still necessary, and it's great to see that it is still happening, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it does feel like an issue that's died down quite a bit, which is indicative that maybe things are better, but also, yeah, as we said during the news section, something that we absolutely have to stay vigilant about if we want to really cut down on predatory kind of practices within gaming. Another one of the big kind of topics that we've covered at length was around the streaming future, as we quite often refer to it as, and particularly I suppose that centres around the launch of Stadia back in November. You said, I think on last week's show, maybe the week before, that Stadia, has really dropped the ball. We quoted the Take-Two CEO on how it totally overpromised on the technical side of things. Where do you see the future going from this point on, and everything that we've seen happen in that streaming debate in the last year?
Well, I think you're right in what you're saying there, and that Stadia overpromised on what they were capable of delivering and when they were capable of delivering it, which disillusioned a lot of people who spent good hard-earned money paying for something that didn't live up to the promises that were given to them, So I can understand right now why people are kind of not massively positive on the streaming future. However, I still ultimately believe that will be the future of video games. Whether that is in 2 years, 5 years or 10 years, I think that ultimately that is coming, and that is coming in a big way. I still very much believe that, and I think that a lot of these things are going to be connected with 5G as well, but that's probably a whole other different conversation for a whole other different podcast. So I think that will massively accelerate things like this. I really haven't changed my position very much with the not so successful launch of Stadia. I have more hope for xCloud, to be honest with you. I think that's probably the most likely one to take off in a big way. But what about you? You were always far more sceptical than I was.
I mean, I remain sceptical, although I guess I've squared the idea with myself that it is probably coming, and that someone, I think it was last week that you kind of said, at some point someone will crack this, and I can't help but think that is the truth, unless Stadia has shown people that it's really not profitable to do it. But I don't think that Stadia's lack of success has really said that specifically. So I still think it's coming. What I would like to see it be paired up with, and we did talk about this quite a bit recently as well, is subscription modelling. I really have enjoyed in the last month or two that I've picked up Game Pass on my PC. It's been so good having access to a lot of things, even things that I'm still probably not going to get around to playing, in all honesty, but the knowledge that I could dip in and try a lot of games that I might not otherwise. And that's a thing that we covered quite early on in our run, was the launch of Apple Arcade, and that immediately just opened up mobile gaming to me in a way that I had just never basically bothered with, other than one or two games, you know.
I totally agree in terms of mobile games, which was something that was big in the last year, certainly with the launch of Apple Arcade. That was a revelation for me as well. I was always never really a mobile gamer, didn't really consider that an option for me, but Apple Arcade's really done wonders to change my mind on that. Yeah. So I think that a similar thing will happen eventually with streaming. Do you know what I mean? It might not be everyone's main platform, but I think that it will be a service that people use at some point, you know?
I think that's such a good way of seeing it. Yeah, I guess that's how I'm looking at my Game Pass subscription as well, that it's like a thing that I can access. It's not my main gaming platform. And so I suppose, setting aside the other big topic that we've come back to time and again, which is obviously the kind of road to next gen, which we're still very much on. One other big thing that I think that we've covered and felt quite passionate about covering is around both politics in gaming and also workplace culture and crunch and those kinds of issues that exist within the games industry. And I wonder just if you could say what you think about the developments within those kind of areas in the last 12 months. Blitzchung and the whole Hearthstone controversy being a big part of that, but also we've seen with the workplace culture so many companies being taken to task for the way that their staff are treated, and a bit of a pushback against that.
Well, I think that this is also a reflection on gaming journalism, which for a long time has just been laughed at, or has been told that it's lesser than, or continuously been told it's not been doing a good job. But in actual fact, then you see Cecilia D'Anastasio's piece on Riot Games, which has completely revolutionised the culture at that studio, or at least started it, at least started a revolution, at least started moving things forward. Then you get people like Jason Schreier who are massively pushing for unionisation in development studios. And just last week we saw that Paradox Games had entered into a collective bargaining agreement with their employees, which is just fantastic to see. And I think that the more that these issues are brought up, whether it be the hypocrisy of the Blitzchung situation or toxic workplaces, whether that be Riot or Quantic Dream was also said that, or whether it be Crunch, whether that be Rockstar, whether that be Epic, as long as these people are being held accountable for their employees and their actions, and when they abuse or mistreat their employees, then there is swift action by the media. This is how the system's supposed to work. And right now, I think actually video games are doing a pretty fucking good job of this. And people like Cecilia D'Anastasio and Jason Schreier are just two of lots of people working very hard to make sure that these people are held accountable and trying to hopefully change video games for the better. In terms of politics and video games, and the crowd of people that always shout, oh, politics shouldn't never be part of video games and video games operates outside of the political field, it's just not true. I mean, it's not true. You can't operate a multinational corporation in that way. It doesn't exist outside of the political landscapes in which they operate. And things like this are important. And they're important, one, because we're decent human beings and we want people who work hard to earn a good living and not have to kill themselves doing it. But also, completely selfishly, I want to play good fucking video games. And the way that we get good fucking video games is by getting really good people, which the video games industry really struggles to keep, really good people who are passionate about programming and just all the parts that come together to create a video game, and keeping them there and keeping them happy. And then they will create the best games. They will create the best media for us to consume. And so on a completely selfish level, even if you don't give a shit about them as human beings, completely selfishly, you should still want this. Because it will result in you playing better games.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that is the key to all it. And I think it's been good that we've talked about these things a lot, and that the gaming culture more broadly is starting to grapple with these issues a lot, because the best games of the last 12 months that we were talking about at the start of this segment are not possible without some of these really deep-seated, deep-rooted issues in the gaming economy and industry, without them being addressed and tackled and people keeping pressure up. So it's absolutely fundamental to how good the video games that you get to play are that some of these issues are being talked about.
All right, Lewis. Well, here's to another 12 months, and new generations and new consoles and lots of more exciting things that are happening in video games.
Absolutely, yep. Can't wait for more.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll have to leave it there this week. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find Players2 on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really helps us out. It does so much for the exposure of the show, and while you're over there, if you could leave us a review as well, again, it just helps us out so, so much. And thank you so much, genuinely. Thank you so much to anyone that's done that for us over the last year. You're an absolute legend, and you're a big part of the reason why we're continuing to do this. So thank you so much.
Hear, hear.
I'd like to remind everyone that our play-along game for this month is Volume, which will be our second Mike Bithell game. I've not got onto it yet. I'll be finishing Resident Evil. Then we might be on to The Last of Us very shortly after that, so it might have to be fit in between. We'll see how it goes, but I'm still very excited to play it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.